I've always been fascinated by the question of who is alive and who isn't alive, and who is a distinct being and who isn't a distinct being. And I'm not by that talking about, are insects fully alive or spiders, because of course they're fully alive and they're fully sentient and they have their own lives as valuable to them as yours is to you and mine is to me. And I'm not talking about whether trees or bushes are fully alive, because of course they are. And they're fully sentient and they have lives as valuable to themselves as yours is to you and mine is to me. And I'm also not quite in this conversation thinking about, when a tree dies or when a human dies, what the transformations that take place. Because I think that's really fascinating too. When I die, then, most of the cells in my body are not actually my DNA. And there are plenty of bacteria who will be delighted when I die, and they'll just start to consume my body. And it's the same with a tree, with anyone. And that I find really fascinating too. I'm looking out the window. The reason I keep not looking at the camera is because I'm looking at a tree who, not that, a tree who died probably, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. And at this point, a 15-foot, it's an alder, a 15-foot, I don't know if you call it a stump at that point because it's 15 feet tall, but there were a snag, a 15-foot snag remains, and the rest of it's fallen to the ground and it's becoming part of the forest. We all know that stuff. We don't pay as much attention to as we should, but we all know about that. But what I'm in this conversation, what I'm really thinking about is something I've thought about for a long time, which is a fire a living being? And it I've wondered this for so long. Is it a distinct being that if a fire starts in a forest or if a fire starts in your fireplace, is that a distinct being who not well, I was going to say not just a process, but what is a living being but a process? What is my body but a process? And is a fire a living being, or is a river a living being? And we can say, well, a living being is a community, but I'm a community too. I've got all these different beings in me. And, you know, I've thought about this with rivers, that rivers, nutrients flow in, nutrients flow out, water flows in, water flows out. And what is that same thing happens with our bodies? Water flows in and then water flows out, and nutrients flow in and they flow out. And there are various sub communities inside um, inside of our bodies. There are, white blood cells to who are told by the TNF um, to fight off invading invasive species, as they were, to fight off invaders in our bodies. And there are various communities within a river or various communities within the soil. I mean, it's not too much of a stretch for us to talk about the soil being alive. But is the soil a collective being? That's the question. Is a forest a larger collective being? I mean, yes, we all understand that a forest consists of living communities, but is it itself a larger living being? And I don't know the answers to this. I don't know how we define our terms. I just know, and I've wondered this with clouds too. Is a cloud a living a living entity too? Uh, where do what are the edges of who is and who isn't a being? And one of the things that I'm trying to do with all of my work really is to shift the window of discourse. I mean, right now we don't really consider trees to be living beings at all with lives worthy of their own consideration. And I really want to shift our discourse. And one of the ways I want to shift it is to start looking at rivers as living beings. You know, this you could say this is really crazy in some senses, but you know, they've talked about they're really pushing for rivers to have rights and for mountains to have rights. I think that this what I'm trying to talk about now is the spiritual equivalent of that legal movement of how do we how do we live such that we perceive these others as not just how do we live to perceive these others as living beings, but are they distinct beings? You know, it's there's a line that I've always really loved, which is um, that humans are basically flatworms with legs. And um, I mean, it's true. What is a being? You know, that we're not that much different. And again, flatworms consume stuff and then they excrete stuff. Humans consume stuff and we excrete stuff, and we happen to walk around in between. So who is and who isn't a being?